Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Councillor Anne-Marie Barker, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the voluntary West Surrey Joint Committee on Wednesday, the 18th of February 2026. It's at 1 p.m. apparently, interestingly. And we're here in the Council Chamber at Spelthorne Borough Council. So welcome to all the members of the committee. We have some officers here as well from various different councils, and good to see we have a few people in the gallery as well. So welcome to you. We're going to go on in a moment to introduce ourselves, but first of all, I'd just like to mention a few items of housekeeping. The meeting is being broadcast live on Spelthorne Borough Council's YouTube channel, so all those attending the meeting accept that they will be filmed and recorded. There's no fire drill expected today, so if the fire alarm does sound, everyone's asked to please follow the council staff out of the building to the muster point, which is at the front of the office building. Please do ensure you've turned off or silenced your mobile phones. And I'll just mention that anyone is permitted to film, record or take photographs at joint committee meetings. Please liaise with the committee manager prior to the start of the meeting so the meeting can be made aware of any filming taking place. A bit late now to read that out, isn't it, to be honest? So if you are recording, basically you're fine to do it as long as you're not going to disturb the meeting. And if that was the case, I might need to ask you to turn it off. So no playing other YouTube videos. When you are speaking, members of the committee, please do turn on the microphone. Remember to turn it off when you've finished speaking. If I do have to adjourn the meeting at any time, I will advise that an adjournment is taking place and state the time of being reconvened. We don't have any exempt business scheduled today, but if we did need to go into that, then I would need to exclude press and public if that situation did occur. So I'd now like to ask the members of the committee just to briefly introduce themselves. So I'll go first of all to my left, and Councillor Paul follows.
Thank you. Chair, Councillor Paul follows, Leader of Waverley Borough Council.
Sean MacDonald, Leader of Surrey Heath Borough Council.
Julia McShane, Leader of Guildford Borough Council.
Joanne Sexton, Leader of Spelthorne Borough Council.
Catherine Powell, Surrey County Councillor.
Liz Townsend, Surrey County Councillor for Cranley and Newhurst.
Lance Spencer, Surrey County Councillor, Goldsworth East and Hallsall Village in Woking.
Matt Furness, Surrey County Councillor for Shalford Division.
Mark Newty, Surrey County Council.
Sinead Mooney, Surrey County Councillor for Staines.
Robert King, co-leader of Ely Borough Council.
Thanks, everybody. And then I'll just ask the officers to introduce themselves. So I'll start on my right here.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Terence Herbert. I'm the SRO and the Chief Executive of Surrey County Council.
Thank you, Nicola Kilvington. I'm the Programme Director.
Thank you, Nicola. And then on my left here as well.
Thank you, Chair. Nick Stevens, Deputy Lead Officer for West and Chief Executive of Surrey Heath Borough Council.
Hi, Karen Brimacombe, Chief Exec at Moore Valley District Council, and I am the theme sponsor for the People and Governance theme.
Good afternoon. Rachel Wigley, I am the Finance Workstream Lead, and I'm Director of Finance and Deputy Section 151 at Surrey County Council.
Good afternoon, my name is Sally Kipping. I'm the Head of Transformation at Surrey Heath Borough Council and the Deputy Lead for People and Governance for West.
Thank you very much, everybody. And we will be joined later in the meeting as well by Susan Sale, who's the co-workstream lead for the Constitutional and Shadow Authority workstream. She'll be joining us for item 6 on the agenda. Okay, so moving on to the meeting. I'm not aware of any apologies for absence this evening. I think this afternoon even we have everybody here, I believe. Oh, sorry, you didn't introduce yourself, Simon. My apologies.
Simon Rumsby. I'm Secretariat for the committee.
A very important part of the committee as well. Thank you very much, Simon. So yes, we don't have any apologies for absence, do we, Simon?
We've got no apologies for absence today.
Do any committee members have any declarations of interest in respect of any items to be considered at the meeting? No, I don't see any. Thank you very much. We'll move on then to the minutes of the previous meeting. This is item 3 on the agenda, and this relates to our meeting on the 16th of January. Do we agree the minutes of the meeting as a correct record? Now, I believe we do have a couple of points, don't we? Thank you. So, Councillor Follows, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. In regards to the request that I made and was granted by the committee to have an early financial baseline for the West, I'd like to propose an amendment to clarify what I meant by financial baseline, and my rationale for doing that is that I have been through the Surrey County Council budget process in the last month, and I think rather than run into a point where members get a financial baseline and it isn't what we expect in March, it would be easier for me to offer a clarification. And so I would like to propose a clarifying amendment to suggest what I mean by a baseline to be a forecast opening balance sheet, or at least the forecast opening reserve statement, a general fund financial forecast for 5 years to update the model submitted to HMG for the bid in the first place, a financial forecast for the combined HRA, forecast prudential indicators including debt and treasury repayments, so the treasury management strategy, and that would also need to include external and internal debt, and finally an amalgamated capital programme. I'd like to propose that as an amendment, and I believe I have a seconder.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Is the committee happy to accept that amendment from Councillor Follows? Councillor Mooney.
Could Councillor Follows direct us where in the minutes he's proposing this, please?
If I may, Madam Chair. So at the bottom of, depending on, I'm looking at the online version as hosted on the Surrey County Council website. So it either says page 3 of 9 or page 7, depending on which you're talking about. There's a section that says members discuss the need for an early financial baseline for West Surrey, emphasising the need, etc. There is some specificity in that language. I think just to ensure that it is very clear what we mean, I would propose the language that I've just referred to in my amendment. I can send that to Simon in full if you'd like, and I can do that right now.
Councillor Nitty.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask for what purpose we want this? Because it seems quite a lot of work to be done for a financial statement which you're going to do what with? We are not setting the budget for this new West County Council. Most of what we will be looking at will not be relevant to that budget. So I'm not quite sure why we're going down this work stream.
Thank you, Councillor Nitty. Well, I think we agreed the principle that we needed the financial statement last time. All that Councillor Follows is looking to do now is just to clarify some of the detail about what might be required in that. So the principle of doing it was agreed. I think we're just looking to clarify what detail is required. Does anyone have any further comments, or are we happy to agree that amendment? We agreed? Thank you very much. Certainly. Okay, we'll take that to a vote then. So all those in favour of the amendment made by Councillor Follows?
It's 9-4.
Thank you very much, Simon. And those against?
3 against.
Thank you very much. So that amendment is agreed. Yes, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. If I could refer members to it's page 8 of 9 or page 12, depending which reference is used. It relates to the people aspects that we discussed last time, which members might remember. I proposed a number of things and then reverted to narrowing that. The narrowing of the scope to the interim statutory officer designation process in the minutes is not what was agreed. It was agreed that members' concerns on the overall approach, the roles, the timeline of the whole work stream would be reflected on in good faith by officers with working group member input as per the amendment and with an updated report brought back to the full committee to note. I therefore would propose that the third last paragraph is changed to reflect the substance of the debate and discussion and what was agreed. So the proposed minutes changed to replace for the interim statutory officer designation process with for the workstream elements as covered in phases 1 to 3 as documented in the officer report at the next meeting. I have made this wording available to Simon for effectiveness in advance. Furthermore, that it is duly noted that this action is now overdue today, so it needs to be escalated in the officer's planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Does anyone have any points to raise or response to Councillor MacDonald's proposal? No?
If it needs to be, I don't know if it needs to be seconded and voted on. I don't know whether we're going through that palaver, Chair.
Yes, we probably do need a second just to be sure. So Councillor Spencer is going to second that. Thank you very much, Councillor Spencer. Is everyone happy to agree Councillor MacDonald's amendment? Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. So we'll now come to, Councillor Sexton, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I noticed that Councillor Nuti was moving his head around. I don't think, could you be clear in terms of whether or not that was sufficient, because he didn't seem very happy with the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So would you prefer we took a vote? I'm sorry, it's quite a wide screen range here, isn't it? I wasn't looking properly that way, so I do apologise, Councillor Nitty. Did you want to take a vote on that? Okay, fine. We'll have a vote on that. So all those in favour of the amendment as proposed by Councillor MacDonald?
It's 9-4.
Thank you. And those against?
And 2 against.
Thank you very much. So that amendment is agreed. We now come on to agreeing the minutes overall. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 4, the implementation plan update. And I'm going to hand over to Terence to begin with to introduce the report. Thank you, Terence.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may just give a very brief update, reflections on activities since the last meeting. The implementation team have now met twice, and obviously their minutes will be available. We had a programme away day, which Nicola will touch on later. A significant number of people have been mobilised into programme roles from across all of the 12 constituent authorities. We are acutely aware of the amount of work that needs to be done, whilst at the same time ensuring that we maintain business as usual in each of our own authorities, and the need to work at pace. Government have told us that they are on track with the structural changes order, and we expect that to come into force on the week beginning the 9th of March. The election planning for East and West Surrey is underway, and as we know, now underway in many more authorities since the announcement this week. But if we turn to the period between the elections and first shadow authority meetings, we will want, obviously, to support the Joint Committee to hand over the foundational work to the shadow authorities, and a key moment for that will be the first shadow authority meetings. Dates are being finalised, but the initial plan to propose holding the inaugural meetings for the Shadow Authority is on the afternoon of the 21st of May. A full schedule of Shadow Authority meetings will be presented to the Joint Committees in March. And I hope or know that many members have taken up the offer to meet with Nick Deputy for the West, for conversation in between the formal meetings, and obviously want to remind the committee that the rest of the implementation team and myself as the SRO are here to support you in your roles. Looking further ahead, and this is obviously for information only, but we have heard from government that they are to welcome expressions of interest from areas wishing to secure a foundational strategic authority. That, as you know, is a step below a mayoral authority, and the expectation is that areas have foundational strategic authorities that mature before mayoral functions are devolved. MHCLG have indicated that the footprint for an FSA would mirror the spatial development strategy footprint, which is county-wide. We have until the 20th of March to submit an EOI, and this is a matter for the sovereign authorities and the leaders of those authorities to consider next steps, although mindful that all 12 authorities in their communication to the Minister stated their support of a mayor for Surrey. So in light of this clarity and direction of travel, what are likely to be tight timescales for 2027, Nicola will support Richard Carr, as you know, is the Managing Director Commissioner in Woking, and he is the Strategic Authority Theme Lead, and they will stand up that theme with regard to any associated work that's required. So if I turn to the report, it provides an update on the development of the single implementation plan that supports safe and legal transition to West and East Surrey Unitary Authorities. As agreed at our January meeting, I'm bringing forward the initial draft content for several key sections of the plan for your review today. The committee is being asked to endorse the draft vision, working principles, definition of success for the devolution local government reorganisation programme. This will give clarity to members, officers, residents, businesses and partners on what we are collectively aiming to achieve through the transition and how we will work together across the 12 councils to get there. You're asked to note the emerging approaches to programme-wide risk management, budget monitoring and communications, which will form essential components of the final implementation plan. The rationale for these recommendations is straightforward. Once the SCO is enacted, producing an implementation plan becomes a legal requirement. Agreeing these early components now keeps us on track to deliver the full plan to the required timescale ahead of handover to shadow authorities later this year. So now I'm going to ask Nicola to share some further details.
Thank you. So, excuse me, as you all know, the central task is for all councils to develop a single implementation plan to enable the safe and legal transition to the two new unitary authorities. Since the approach was agreed at the last meeting, the implementation team have made some progress in assembling the content we expect to be required once the structural changes order is enacted. So you know now that we have the work streams that cover all major programme themes, with officers from every council contributing to that. The role of those is to support the planning and delivery required for the transition. It's not to preempt the design of any future authorities, and they've already begun the detailed work needed to map services and prepare the content expected in the final plan. The work streams that are sitting below those themes were included in Annex 1 to the report. As Terence mentioned, we recently brought the workstream leads, the implementation team and the core programme leads together in Dorking to launch the next phase of the programme. We felt that it was a successful day. There was quite a lot of energy in the room and a real keenness from people there to work collaboratively on the next stage together. John Metcalf, the MHCLG Senior Sector Advisor, was there sharing lessons learned from Cumbria, and it was an opportunity to set expectations around ways of working to hopefully enable this programme to be a success. So today, members of the committee are being asked to endorse 3 foundational sections of the implementation plan. These are included in Annex 2. So we've brought here the draft vision that sets out what we aim to achieve through this transition, hopefully a seamless, well-managed change that protects residents, staff and services through this process. Also, the working principles, they describe how all 12 councils will operate together as one programme, emphasising collaboration, transparency and shared responsibility. And then the definitions of success provide clarity on what we hope a successful transition should look and feel like by vesting day. Endorsing these sections today give us the clear direction of travel necessary for the remaining elements of the plan to be developed consistently and at pace. Turning to risk management, which is also covered in this report, we are developing a single programme-wide risk management framework. This will introduce consistent scoring, monitoring and escalation arrangements across all of the themes. We've done some early identification to highlight several significant risks, including capacity pressures, contract-related issues, and the challenges associated with disaggregating county-wide services and transitioning systems and data from all councils. These are expected at this stage of reorganisation of this scale, and we are already working through some mitigations supported through the programme board. Also in this report, members will recall that leaders and chief executives have agreed to a single implementation fund of 35.3 million. To date, just over 8 million of that has been committed, mainly to initiate the Programme Management Office and to prepare the detailed disaggregation work. Further modest requests were considered by the Programme Board this month, including additional support for capacity across district and boroughs in the Programme Management Office and for communications activities. We are starting an exercise now to refresh the overall cost estimates up to March 2027, and from March this year onwards, we will be bringing regular budget monitoring reports back to the committee. As we mentioned earlier, also at members' request, the committee will be presented with a baseline budget position once the budgets for all current councils have been agreed. It is anticipated that the county council's budget will be disaggregated across the West and East councils, and also planning at the moment for a standalone combined fire and rescue authority. We expect this to be relatively high level, using the tax base as a proxy measure. Then Annex 3 sets out the developing communication strategy. This is vital to ensure that residents, staff and partners understand what is happening, why it is happening and how they may be affected. The strategy covers both internal and external communications, as well as branding, channels and supporting materials. We hope that this strategy helps to build confidence, increase transparency and help minimise uncertainty as the programme progresses. So then finally, the report also covers next steps. So as you'll be aware, we will continue to build out the implementation plan, drawing on contributions from all work streams. We'll continue to work on risk, budget and communications content. And as we said, more further detail will be brought to the next committee meeting in March. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Terence and Nicola. Just a sort of point of clarification, if I could just ask first, and then I'll come to Councillor MacDonald. In relation to the strategic authority, there's a point on page 16 of the report, point 2, and you've just referred to it, Terence. I wonder if you could just explain for clarity exactly what's going to be happening in relation to this. So what is being taken forward on that theme? You mentioned a March date, which I wasn't familiar with before. What exactly is going to be happening in relation to that strategic authority potentially in the future?
So government have said to all councils going through reorganisation that they can express an interest in applying to create a foundational strategic authority, and the deadline for those is the 20th of March. So that's when government would like to receive those expressions of interest. The reference made earlier is we had always penciled in a strategic authority theme, because when we set about this exercise last year, it was to unlock further devolution. So we stand ready as a theme to stand up work should Sovereign Council leaders support that expression of interest, and we are then chosen by government to take that forward.
Thanks for that clarity, Nicola. That's helpful. So what's the process for that to then be decided by leaders before the 20th of March? It isn't very far away. I'm not aware of any piece on any council agendas to make that decision. Where does that come from?
So the government haven't specified what they would just like to see an expression of interest from areas. We had a discussion at the implementation team, or we had an early discussion at the implementation team noting the deadline, and my understanding is that all chief executives have gone away to speak with their leaders about their thoughts on expressing an interest, and the Implementation Programme Board at their next meeting will bring that information back.
Okay, thank you. That hasn't reached me as yet. I don't know anybody else. No, it looks like nobody else has had that yet. So I think we do need to have a look into that. But we'll come back to that outside the meeting. Thank you very much. Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thank you. Could I just first note on the record that there's obviously a huge amount of work gone in, and we really appreciate that. So thank you for bringing this forward. I think there were rave reviews from the meeting in Dorking, so well done to all involved in that as well, to bring everybody together. I actually was going to ask a similar question with respect to the update that Terence gave. I don't remember seeing a letter from the Minister landing in my inbox, although they do seem to be sending letters like it's confetti at the moment. Do we actually have anything of substance in terms of this direction of travel, or is it just words? Because, to be honest, unless it's going into the parliamentary pipeline, at the House of Commons, I don't trust anything at the moment that I'm getting from the ministers. And I appreciated very much the comments from, I think it was the Conservative leader of Kent Council concerning the relevant minister and his behaviour over some of these matters recently.
So, thank you. Terence, you thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll start. Nicola can come in. Yeah, a letter was sent to all leaders, so you should have it. And a statutory instrument would need to be laid for this to take place. We have been promised by MHCLG that there will be further clarity, but it is a sovereign authority responsibility. So, as chief executives, we're not able to and wouldn't presuppose to know what it is you're thinking, but it is a matter for you to instruct and for that to be made to government, and then it actually be for the shadow authorities to follow through after May.
Could I come?
Yes, sorry, Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, could I please come? Anne-Marie, I thought one of the things that worked really well in our previous meeting was that we went to first names because it emphasised the collaboration. I don't know if it's because we're in this grand edifice here and we're so distant from each other, we defaulted to the formality. But I think in terms of this committee and the work we're doing, I think it does to set the right tone. So I don't know if that's something you could consider as chair, but I'll leave that to you. With respect to that, on previous occasions, as far as I remember, we have potentially defaulted back to Surrey leaders as the right forum for us to ensure alignment, and I'm sure that will potentially be discussed at the East meeting or whatever as well. That could be the place where we try and look for consensus. Just on a technicality point, because it's coming through in all the papers, I note that we are getting comments from Section 151, HR lead, monitoring officer. This joint committee has not appointed those people. They have no authority at this committee. Now, I don't want to make too much of an issue of it, apart from to say, could I propose that the deputies get the chance to comment on those papers? I think we've got two of them here present today, Susan and Sally, but I think the other one might be Vicky. That they get a comment, they get the opportunity to comment on those, and then we see the consistent balance in how we've been approaching these matters, just to ensure that members are getting the complete picture from all perspectives.
Thank you, Sean. Terence.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I think that it's given you've asked for everybody to use the first names, and that's the culture and the approach that we're taking in the joint committee. You'll allow me to speak as freely as possible. The officer corps at Surrey County and D's and B's have worked very hard over the last number of months to work collaboratively to a shared outcome. And I think, I'll let Karen and I'll let Nick speak for themselves, but I believe that the work that's going on and the information that comes to the joint committees are signed off and agreed by all of the chief executives and all members of the implementation board. So I don't feel that it's necessary or appropriate for us to delineate which is county and which is a D and B piece of advice, because it's all agreed and signed off, and members of the implementation board are encouraged, welcomed and encouraged indeed, to get involved. And the 151 MOHR comments are defined by the workstream leads, and they're asked to decide what comments come forward. Karen, workstream lead for governance on HR. Karen is a district and borough chief executive. So I don't know, Nick, Karen, is there anything you want to add to that?
In terms of, if I take the MO side, the papers are signed off by the lead of the governance services. I think this time it was ASMAT that signed them off. Depending on availability, it might be ASMAT or it might be the co-lead, who is Piero from Epsom and Newell. But it will purely boil down to who's available.
Thank you very much, Karen. Sean.
I'm very happy to take that clarification. I'm just responding to the words that we see on the document, which specifically says monitoring officer. It says section 1.5 officer. It doesn't make that clarity that it's coming from a pool of people, but now we've had that, that's fantastic. If the template could be updated, then I'm on the same page there. But thank you for your clarification, Terence.
Thanks very much. I've got Liz and then Lance.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Just coming back to the report and the risk register, and you mentioned about pulling out some of the risks there. I was a little bit disappointed in points 11 and 27 that the specific risk of debt within West Surrey has not been pulled out, to be honest. And I know that there have been other members here that have also concerned about that. And I do think that we do need to specifically add that into point 11 and also point 27. I mean, that there does show on page 28 as well that it says the risk register shows no critical unresolved issues at vesting day. And I kind of don't agree with that. I don't think that we have bottomed out where we're going to be with debt. And I think it would be remiss of us not to have some mention of the actual debt in West Surrey in particular. You've made some inference, but it isn't pointed enough. I think we owe it to residents and we owe it to this group of members here to show that we are cognizant of those debt levels. And I think that does create a significant risk to the new West Surrey Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it is an omission. I think I know if several people have raised this. Terence is going to respond. Thank you, Terence.
Can I?
Apologies, Nicola will respond. Thank you.
I thought I was going to, but you go.
I guess just so we can take that feedback back to the finance and property theme in terms of considering that for future iterations of the risk register. We are, though, looking at a distinction between the transition risks and not anticipating a future risk register for the new authorities. So the new authorities will want to set out their risks in their risk register, and we will look at this in the context of the transition. So I think we can take it back to have a look at the next iteration of this with that feedback. But I just wanted to draw that distinction between the two things, because there are many risks that we could put in here that we are not putting in here because they feel like they're the jurisdiction of the new councils.
I'm afraid I vehemently disagree. Those risks exist. They are not going to be just for the new council. They exist now on paper. And I think it's really important that those are not glossed over. And I don't, to be fair, I don't want you to take it to a future iteration. I want it to be in this iteration because we have very few of these meetings and we've got very little time. And, to recognise that debt is a risk that we are taking on in West Surrey, I think that it is wrong to actually overlook that. And I can appreciate you saying about, that it's for a future unitary to decide what to do with that debt, but equally we have to be cognizant of and aware of that risk and put it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, I think it's a risk to the success of the transition is at the end of the day and going into that new authority. But Terence would like to comment. Thank you, Terence.
Thank you, Chair. The implementation team, and that is who we are. We're the implementation team, and that's the reason that we're sitting here in front of the Joint Committee, are acutely aware, because of our day jobs, what the likely debt profile is going to be for West Surrey. There isn't any attempt whatsoever to ignore it, or indeed to hide or obfuscate it. But the implementation team is bringing forward reports to the Joint Committee pertinent to the terms of reference and the role of the Joint Committee. And at such time, whenever the shadow authorities are in place, as Nicola says, it'll be a matter for them to consider the debt and the transformation. It is not yet at the point where we know exactly what that debt is going to be. And it's not the role of the Joint Committee, regardless of requests for knowledge of what the debt is going to be, for that to be considered at this point in time. That won't in any way stop us from drafting the plan.
Sorry, if I could come back, Chair, apologies. I mean, I think it's a disagreement on what you think is pertinent and what I think is pertinent, and I think that that's fair enough, but I think that it should be within this report. You don't think it's pertinent, but I think other members here do think it's pertinent and do think, and perhaps we just need to vote on whether or not we want it contained within this report and recognised as a risk. That's all we're asking, is the recognition that it is a risk, and it's a risk of implementation as well. It's not just a risk on vesting day. So on my request, if I've got a seconder for that, is to include within the risk register the debt, particularly for West Surrey, which is obviously the area that this particular committee is concerned about.
Thank you, Liz. Did you want to speak on this point, Robert?
Just a clarity on maybe a halfway house in this. Obviously, I can appreciate the Secretary Chief Exec's position that we're not deciding what to do with the assets and debt, but I absolutely agree with Liz on that there is an implementation risk here if that runs away with us, particularly around understanding the amount of debt and where it's at, but also not fettering the future authority because things have sort of taken over ourselves there. So maybe really that's the specific here to actually understand in the transition what is the specific risk of that rather than fettering a position for a future authority.
Can I just go to Catherine and then let you come back, because perhaps there'll be a point you want to pick up on, Terence. Sorry, thank you very much for your patience, Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And I agree entirely with what Liz has said, and I did obviously raise some of these issues before today's meeting. And I think what's really pertinent is when you read the Section 151 officer's statement, which obviously Sean referenced earlier, and you look at 27, paragraph 27, it reads, both East and West Surrey will operate in very challenging financial environment with significant budgetary pressures and limited financial resources from 27-28, coupled with an increasing demand for services and cost of services. Both the new unitaries will be increasingly reliant on council tax as a primary source of income. I see absolutely no reason why there cannot be a reference to the high levels of debt that we all know exist currently in the West Surrey councils within that same statement. And then at least it is recognised within this report. Somebody picks this report up with no understanding of the situation in Surrey, they wouldn't even know there was debt in West Surrey. And I don't believe that that is an open and transparent document for the residents of Surrey. And I really would like us to address it. And I agree with Liz, it is a transitional risk because the debt has to transfer from one council somewhere. And therefore it is a transitional risk. It's not just something that the new councils will have to pick up. Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you. I had Paul to speak. Is that on this point, Paul?
No, it's a separate point. I agree with it.
Right, okay, that's fine. So I'll get you to speak in a moment on that point. Yes, and we've got, I think, Mark, is that speaking on this particular point? Yeah, do you want to speak now then, please? And then I'll come back to you in a minute as well, Lance. Yeah.
My only comment, I mean, I suppose a bit like Robert trying to sort of hit some sort of middle ground here, it does sound like you want two risk registers because What Nicola has quite clearly stated is this is a risk register which totally deals with the transition, the disaggregation and aggregation into the new council. What you are talking about is the risks that that council will face once it is formed, i.e. what it inherits from us as a county council and you as a borough council. Now, how far do you want that risk register to go? I mean, there's a risk that borough councils get rid of all their assets before the transfer comes along, or use their reserves, in which case it will be in a financially worse position again. There does seem to be two different levels of risk here. This risk is about the job we're doing here today, which is about transitioning the council. Your risk is about what that council then will hold in respect of what is left from the finances of the borough and districts and the Surrey County Council.
Thank you, Mark. Lance, did you want to speak on this point?
I do now, yes.
Thank you.
So the issue is, the whole point about this transition is to have a viable council when we vest. If the shadow council is not able to set a balanced budget, i.e. effectively we have a bankrupt council on day one, then I can't see how you can say the transition has been successful if that is the case. And the 4.2 billion of debt, or thereabouts, held by West Surrey is a risk to the transition, i.e. you will not be able to transition to a successful council on vesting day if you don't take into account what's happening with this debt.
Thank you, Lance. Joe.
I'm not going to regurgitate what Lance has just said, but yes, you've taken the words out of my mouth before I had the chance to speak, so thank you very much indeed for saving my breath. But it's absolutely fundamental that we absolutely understand where we are before we obviously lose our sovereignties and indeed understand specifically how West Surrey will operate. And also, I would just like to say at this point, what Robert proposed earlier, if you don't have a seconder, I would love to second that because I think that's absolutely the right way to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Did you want to come back on that turn? So now everyone's spoken. Thank you.
As has been asked for by Councillor Follows, there will be some budget information, which is whatever is available, will be brought to the next joint committee. The commissioners at Woking and Spelthorne have offered and are preparing a briefing for joint committee members on the debt. Separately, I've met with Leslie Surrey and Sir Tony Redmond, who have stated that it's their responsibility and they will become engaged fully with the shadow authorities and the joint committees whenever it comes to working out the debt profile, and that engagement is there. It is a live issue, it is known. You want the transition risk to be written differently. I'm sure we can do that, but I will come back to the same point that the joint committee's responsibilities are not the same as the shadow authorities. And whilst the success of the shadow authorities will be understood better after vesting day, there will be a transition, a successful transition to West Surrey. How the finances impact on that will be known after vesting day. But your point is taken, and we will consider how the 151 report is written.
Thank you,
Chair.
Terence.
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt, but we did have Robert put forward
I
a
was just going
proposal,
back.
and I think it was seconded, and I'd like to vote on it, please.
Thank you. I was just coming to that point, but thank you, Liz, for clarifying that. So if I could just ask Robert to repeat his proposal, if you can remember what he said.
I think it was obviously understanding not fettering two authorities' future positions. It was understanding specifically that transitional risk of debt asset management in terms of exemplifying that for committee members and the layman, man or woman on the street that would obviously read into this there. So for that explicitly to be stated in a report, and whether we call that a risk register or not, I'm less concerned about.
Thank you, Robert. So that's been proposed by Robert and seconded by Joe. Are we happy to accept that proposal to move us forward on this point? Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, great. I'll now move on to, I've got Lance to speak on a separate point, I believe, and then Paul and then Sean.
I have two separate points, if I'm allowed, Chair. The first one is on communications. So the communication section in the paper is very good, but rather general. We do have elections on May the 7th. Clearly, part of the communications about local government reform needs to go out to our voters to better explain what's going on. And because I do a lot of canvassing, one of the questions that keeps coming up, or I have to explain, is the fact that voters will get to get 2 votes on the day, not 1. Most people don't seem to be aware of that. So my question is whether any written communication is going to go out to voters before the elections on the nature of local government reform and what they have to do, i.e. they have the opportunity to vote for 2 candidates when they go to vote.
Thank you, Lance Terence. Thank you.
As members no doubt are aware, responsibility for communications for elections rests with the returning officers. The returning officers will be drafting communications and those comms will go out in good time. I can ask both returning officers to progress that. Nick, do you want to add to it?
Yes, thank you, if I may, Chair. Just to confirm, there are drafts of leaflets that will go out with the council tax information that refer to the elections, how to register, and obviously further information around voting will be on the relevant websites.
Liz, is that on this point?
It is, Chair, thank you. Just on that point, Nick, just to how that's going to be branded, you know, I just want, you know, concerned that it will just go out with all the Surrey branding on and nobody will realise, really. And also, on a separate point before, probably you could answer this as well for me, on page 31, it says that the communications work stream consists of representatives from district and borough councils and the county council on a voluntary basis. I just wondered if you could clarify, is what the voluntary basis is within that. It's just slightly confusing. Thank you.
I believe that all of the districts and borough comms leads come together, so they all meet together, but they do it on a voluntary basis. But they have a regular kind of, I think it's a weekly, if not a fortnightly meeting where they come together. So it's all agreed. Yeah. I don't know about the branding, so perhaps somebody can answer that.
I think that's me again. In terms of the branding, conventionally what happens with the council tax leaflet is there is a borough-specific leaflet that goes out, and that goes out in conjunction with the county leaflet as well at the same time, purely to be efficient and save postage costs.
Yes, I was just concerned. I saw the branding about that. Sorry, I saw the comment about there's going to be an insert to go into the district and boroughs leaflets. I was just, what is that going to the leaflet going to be branded with? Thank you.
Good question. Having seen it, but can't recall it in great detail, I understand there is there we are, thank you, Nicola, pointing to the correct thing. There is the relevant branding within the materials, so you will have effectively 3 brands. You'll have the County Council brand for the information that it puts within the bundle, the specific Borough Council, and then you'll have the new West Surrey interim branding as well.
It's the future Surrey branding, isn't it? Sean?
Yeah, thank you. Having spent quite a lot of effort proofreading our own document that's going out and trying to reassure residents around a lot of this, I realised that I have made a school person error of failing to note the fact that there are the 2 votes. So could the officers just specifically take note of Lance's comment and make sure that the information that comes out via the returning officer and via the leaflet covers that specific point, because it is a nuance that's different that we won't have had before. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have Paul and Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. So, first of all, can I just also thank Nicola and the other officers who put this together. I'm just going to talk about some more general points now. I don't have any major issues with the vast majority of the content. Certainly the work stream breakdown is absolutely fine. The vision is absolutely fine. I have no issues with any of that whatsoever. I've got one minor question that's come up from things that have been spoken about, and then one more general one, if Madam Chair, you wouldn't mind me asking just the brief one first. You mentioned about the council tax being the proxy for some of the split. Can I just understand why you've picked that over other theoretical splits such as population?
If I can come in, thank you. So in our work, as we move forward, we're looking at a whole range of different ways of disaggregating, depending. So if it's assets, it might be geography. If it's how we split the staff, then it's where they're tupied to. If we don't have any other way, then it might be tax-based or it might be population. None of that has been finally agreed. So it will depend on circumstances. Yep.
In which case, then I will park further discussion of that pending an assumption that there'll be some kind of briefing to this committee about the ways that you're breaking that kind of process down.
We can do that, yeah.
Right. Okay, in which case I'll just carry on then with the other bit that I was going to mention already. So there are a number of areas in this, though, where there is an undertone, if not an explicit reference, to the leadership team, the implementation team, having a decision-making role that goes beyond the election, effectively. And I just wanted to double check that is what you're intending to say in this document, because for me, realistically, surely all of the authority that comes with the SRO and with the Joint Committee, etc., all of this should end at the point that there's the election and you have a shadow authority. And there's lots of references to the SRO, but surely at that point we'll have an interim chief executive. And so for me, the fact that there seems to be some cases inference, in some cases direct statements, that decision-making on staffing particularly extends up to vesting day, for me that really should be amended to following the election of the shadow authority and end at that point. And that's the assumption that should be baked in going forward as well. I don't see why that authority extends beyond the election up to vesting day. We've stopped many times to say we need to leave things to the new authority. And then there are a few cases where we just seem to abandon that principle whatsoever and carry on. Now, just before I hand over to Terence, I'm sure, I know for a fact, because I can feel the vibe in the room, that many of the officers here and possibly some of the members are thinking that, you know, we're being incredibly awkward about some of the points here, and I'm sure the other committee might not have lasted as long, etc. But we're doing this because we believe, I am sure all of us here, a duty to our boroughs and our residents to do this properly. It's certainly one I take seriously. I apologise if people are finding this awkward and non-constructive, but it is something I feel obliged to do, and I'm sure my colleagues here do too.
Thank you, Paul. Terence, thank you.
The conversations that have been had with MHCLG are very clear that the SRO and the implementation team run until vesting day. We're acutely aware that the shadow authorities, whenever they are constituted, will have a view on the implementation team. And we have asked MHCLG to follow up with a clear briefing note on the intent behind the SCO. But that's what we have been told. The interim chief executives and the SRO of the implementation team have got very different roles. The interim head of paid service of West Surrey will be focused on setting up the culture and the structure, senior management structure, etc., of the new authority. The SRO of the implementation team is responsible for the programme of work up until vesting day.
Without wanting to drag this out, could I request a short briefing note on that subject with the MHCLG guidance be provided for the next iteration of this committee?
I'd love to be able to say yes. However, I have been waiting on MHCLG providing me with that information.
Absolutely, sir.
So presumably it can be shared with members once you have that information. Thank you very much. So I've got Catherine and then Sean. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. I love the fact that we're all waiting on the same organisation for different pieces of information, but I'm sure we'll get there in the end. So just a couple of things. Obviously, Nicola, an awful lot of work has gone into this, and I appreciate it's been generated in a very short period of time. I noticed that Terence, when he introduced the paper, used the terms that I had been using in some of the concerns that I had raised, that, you know, when we go through these documents, it is about supporting staff, but also residents, businesses, partners, and the third sector all the way through this change. And it's not entirely consistent through all of these different documents. So if we could make it consistent, I think that's what we all mean. I think that when you say staff, that's what you mean. You mean all of those different groups, but I think it would be really helpful and beneficial for that to be updated through the documents if we could do it. The other thing that I reflect on very much is I completely understand, and I dread to think how many times Terence has already said this today, that we are here for transition, but all of us also have a duty to spend public money well. So whilst we are here for transition, we are also here to ensure that we are set up, or we are setting up the new authorities for transformation, that the data that we gather, the way we gather it, sets us up not only to ensure that we have a successful transition, but that they have the information they need in the format they need it for transformation. And I think it would be helpful if the documents that you've prepared could reflect both those things, because, you know, we are spending large amounts of public money in doing this. I think everyone in this room is well aware of what that money could have been spent on in other ways to fill other gaps that we all know exist. So I think if you could consider that, Nicola, and if the committee was willing to support those two things, then I would very much appreciate that being done in a future iteration of this document, if at all possible.
Thank you, Catherine. I think that's a good point. I don't know if it kind of allies a bit to sort of page 26 and the draft vision, which I've no general issue with, but I'm a bit puzzled by the term of customers that we've used here. And I think some of the phrasing that Catherine's just suggested might be more useful there, because I'm not really sure who customers are. There's lots of interactions and different things going on, but I'm not sure that customers really sums it up.
Sure, I can explain. Customers is often a term which is used in adult social care. So it is a very large, important, and it takes a considerable amount of budget, but it's a term which is widely used within that sector.
Okay, but it's probably not appropriate for the wider piece, is it? They are customers there, but, you know, a business isn't a customer. It's probably a stakeholder in things. A resident isn't really a customer.
I think we're trying to please an awful lot of different vested interests, but we'll take your feedback and we'll factor it in.
Yeah, I accept it's used in social care, absolutely, and it is a big part of things, but we need clarity, don't we, across. I've got Sean and then Sinead.
Thank you. So my comments do relate to the vision, the principles and the definitions of success. And I note what Paul said, because I think I had to say something similar in a previous meeting, that it's better to be a critical and supportive friend inside the greenhouse than outside the greenhouse throwing stones. So I hope it's taken in that spirit. I think there are a few things that could be tweaked in each of those documents, or each of those pages, and what I'd, based on members' input, what I'd like to suggest is that anybody has those potential enhancements. We picked up on one of them there around the customers versus stakeholders as an example, that maybe they're fed into the chair and they could work with the head of PMO just to make any adjustments that everybody thinks is appropriate. There's one area, so unless there's any objection to that, you can maybe feed back in a minute, Chair, or other members. But just one thing specifically to pull out is that on the draft vision for the programme, it talks about the transition will be well governed. I think it's missing the and member-led, because we are ultimately responsible here for representing the residents. So I'd like that specifically identified and enhanced. And then similarly, under collaboration on the working principles, that potentially it's added, we recognise members' primacy as the voice of residents in our transition. The fact that none of these documents reference members, I think, was an oversight. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Do you have any comments on that at all? Can we get those updates made?
Just to say thank you for the feedback and that we can look to take that on board. We do know that it doesn't yet read as a single document because we bring through the chapters kind of at pace, but we will certainly do that read through so that there is some consistency.
Thank you, Nicola. Sinead.
Thank you, Chair. Very straightforward question from me. You'll be pleased to hear. I enjoyed looking at this, actually, the different appendices. I thought they were quite clear. I agree with some of the comments made by colleagues in the chamber, some of them, not all. I just wanted to ask about the communications plan and the themes and work streams. With the comms plan, are you going to be measuring how the engagement is going as that comms approach is rolled out? And I also wanted to ask about the themes and work streams. That there seems to me some fairly big differences between the programme for adults and children's social care. And I'm just wondering why that may be the case. If you look at the themes for children's services in the work stream, you've got commissioning and quality. I'm not sure that I could see that in the adult side. I wondered where community safety fits into these work streams, and also whether the voluntary community sector team or group of organisations are included in the work streams as well, if there's a place for them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sinead. Nicola?
Yes, thank you for your question. So, yes, we will be measuring the impact of the communication strategy. Communications teams across all councils currently do that. So we will be looking at and then monitoring and making changes as needed based on that. In terms of the work streams, so each of the themes have been asked to group together their work for the purpose of the transition into between 3 and 5. It's difficult with very large areas like children's and adults in place to do that. So a fuller scoping exercise is taking place to ensure that everything is captured. But I would view these as kind of groups or buckets that people are coming around to do the work. But everything in adults will be captured in there. They've just selected their titles for the purpose of kind of planning the work, but can assure you that the detail sits behind it. In terms of community safety, so we anticipate that will be within the housing and communities work stream, and the lead there, David Ford, is currently working with his group of subject matter experts from all councils to look at exactly, but I think it will be in that communities wellbeing and engagement, but there'll probably be a subsection to that. And likewise, the voluntary sector, that also sits within that theme as well. And again, a group assembled for SMEs across all councils to work within that. We have then recognised that there are links in, so there's a lot of interdependencies here. So conversations are happening at the moment, for example, between the adults theme and the housing communities theme to clarify the crossover there with things like the Commission, voluntary sector services, etc.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just a very quick point and question on that. The question is, Nicola, where is the member oversight within the work streams? Or if there isn't, is there going to be mechanisms for feeding back? And I just wanted to make the point because I think there clearly has been a lot of work that's gone into this from officer representatives, from the county council and the district and borough councils. And I just note in here it's on a voluntary basis, and I think we should acknowledge that with the day jobs that you all do as well. So I just wanted to echo some of the thanks that's been given on that particular point. Thank you.
Thanks, Sinead. Was there a further point to respond to there? Thank you.
So the member oversight comes through the joint committees and through the shadow authorities. So there isn't a mechanism to build that into the themes and the work streams. The implementation team, as represented here, bring that into the joint committees.
Just while we're on that point, before I go to the other speakers I have, I just wonder if we might add, it would be useful to know who the theme and theme leads and subject matter experts are. I know we've got all the themes listed here now, but obviously I think everyone's in place now pretty much. So it'd be good to have that shared with the joint committee.
Yes, it hasn't changed from when we presented it at the last meeting, but we can reshare it round.
perhaps where a few gaps still at that point, maybe. So, yeah.
Will we share it around so that everybody has it?
Thank you very much. So I've got Lance and then Sean.
Thank you, Chair. So this is just a very practical issue with regard to implementation. There are a number of political assistants who are on fixed-term contracts that end on 31st of May. The earliest, the inaugural meeting of the new shadow authority is going to be late May, which makes the timing rather critical for those contracts. Would it be useful if we had a motion passed at this joint committee that indicated what our preference were to do with these political assistants?
Is that something you can respond to, Terence?
I'm not sure. If they're employed by one of the sovereign authorities, then it would be for that sovereign authority to decide as to whether they wish to take account of the joint committee's comments.
So the sovereign is Surrey County Council, obviously, because they are employed by them, or sorry, they're contracted by them. So my proposal was that the joint committee recommends that at the inaugural meeting of the shadow or council that the political contracts are reviewed and recontracted potentially on a 12-month basis. It just gives them some comfort that we are thinking about them, because otherwise they could leave in the meantime. So that was my proposal.
Thank you, Terence.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to have to defer to an HR expert on TUPE issues and whether that an extension to a contract which is due to expire at the end of this year, etc. But we will come back at the next joint committee with a clear with a clear briefing on what the HR issues may well be, but I think if you're saying that the sovereign authority should ensure that their contract is extended, I would need to go back and get advice on that.
No, I absolutely understand that. It's just obviously the individuals involved are in an awkward position. It is the nature of political assistance that their contracts come to an end at the political cycle. I understand that, but this is a rather unique situation. So if you could come back at the next meeting with a suggested way forward so that we do not lose the political assistance during the machinations. Thank you.
Thanks, Lance. Sean and then Catherine.
Yeah, two quick things. So first of all, I very much appreciate Sinead's catch on the community safety piece. And I think if we're calling out things such as libraries, then we really need to call that one out as an individual item. It may not be so obvious to the county colleagues, but it's a massive issue at the district and borough level, where we do a lot of hard graft to oversee that and work with relevant other partners in our communities, but also with the county and with the Police and Crime Commissioner. But just one consideration in that regard. For me, it isn't in housing and communities. It's probably more in place, but maybe that's something officers could just discuss where the best place is for that as well. But if we could call it out, I think it's important that the residents see that. In terms of the updating of us of the named individuals by work stream, could we ensure that includes the deputies or co-theme leads or whatever the terminology was? Because if that's not finished by now, then to be honest, we probably should be giving you a little bit of a nudge to say that you should be finishing it by now. That's part of our scrutiny role. So it would be great to see the full deck of the team. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Catherine.
I was going to ask the same question that Sean just asked, so we're obviously on the same page.
Good stuff. Okay, I think we've had a good and full discussion there. If anyone has any further points on the implementation plan, I think they could share them outside the meeting, if that's okay, because we need to move ahead. So I'm going to put the recommendations to the meeting, which is that we endorse the draft vision, working principles and definitions of success for the devolution and local government regulation programme as set out in Annex 2. We note the approach to risk management and budget monitoring for the programme, and note the approach to communication and engagement as set out in Annex 3. obviously in relation to the various points that we've asked for additional details as we've gone through this process. Are those recommendations agreed? Thank you, Robert. Yes. Okay, let's move on to item 5, which is the interim statutory officer designations for the West Surrey Authority. You'll find this on page 35 to 45 in the pack. I do have to correct an error in the published papers for this meeting. Councillor Catherine Powell was described as representing Farnham Residents Association, whereas this is clearly incorrect. She represents the Farnham Residents Group, and this correction will be reflected in the minutes of this meeting, with apologies to Catherine for that mistake. I'm now going to hand over to Karen Brimicombe, who's going to introduce this report, and she's also supported by Sally Kipping as well, who's here today. Thank you, Karen.
Chair, if it's okay with you, I'll ask Sally to introduce it, and if I could personally apologise to Councillor Powell, because I think that was my mistake in the paper, and I had just realised I'd made it. So sorry about that.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Chair. This paper follows on from the last joint committee on the 16th of January, and it sets out the proposed next steps for members to consider in relation to options for appointing the interim statutory officers for the West Surrey Shadow Authority as required by the Structural Changes Order. The January meeting agreed to create a working group of 4 councillors, which are currently proposed as Councillor Sean MacDonald, Councillor Paul Follows, Councillor Catherine Powell, and Councillor Sinead Mooney. I believe that Councillor Powell has nominated as substitute Councillor Sexton. The Joint Committee is asked to confirm the appointments of those 4 members and the substitute, and also to nominate any other substitutes that are required. The Voluntary Joint Committee is also asked to confirm that the member working group will present its recommended candidates for the interim statutory roles to the Shadow Authority for endorsement in their first meeting in May 2026, which will facilitate the enactment of the Structural Changes Order. Included in the paperwork is Annex 1, which sets out a proposed process and timeline for the interim appointments. Fully appreciate that these appointments are incredibly important to councillors, and we want to absolutely get those recommendations right. So would really appreciate your feedback, and also appreciate that the Shadow Authority themselves will have their own views. The Structural Changes Order sets out the time frame, and it's helpful to consider that the appointment process should therefore be proportionate and within that time frame. The proposed officer pool already exists. Obviously, we have existing statutory and deputy statutory roles, and that should facilitate meeting those timelines. The proposal at this stage is that the process timelines and the draft role profiles will be discussed and agreed at the first working group meeting, which will be facilitated by myself and also Shella Smith, who's the People, Workforce and Culture lead. And we're planning in that briefing to include a short briefing on legal and best practice recruitment requirements. We've asked named substitutes to attend that meeting. I understand Simon is busy setting up that meeting at the moment, and I've offered to meet with any substitutes separately to that meeting if they can't meet that meeting, because I know member time can be quite tricky to pull together. One of the recommendations I know you'll be particularly interested in is the suggestion that interim role applications are broadened to deputies as well as existing statutory officers. The reason we've made this recommendation is to provide councillors with the widest possible high quality pool to consider a good choice of applicants. And, you know, obviously our concern is that we won't meet the timelines outlined in the Structural Changes Order, or be able to recommend to the Shadow Authority in May who your preferred candidates are, and that's something that we're minded of. To mitigate this risk, one option is to consider delegating authority to the People Workstream lead, Shella Smith, to consult with the member working group and then to open the candidate pool beyond the current statutory post holders and their deputies if no applications are received from the initial eligible group. I'm sure you'll want to discuss this and I'm looking forward to receiving your feedback on that. One point I would ask just all councillors to note is that applicants of the pools must be directly employed by one of the relevant councils, either on a permanent or interim contract, so we won't be including temporary or agency staff in the pool. We very much welcome your thoughts and questions and look forward to your feedback.
Thank you very much, Sally. So I'll just mention, I'm going to Sinead in just a moment, who I know indicated first. I'll just mention that the Liberal Democrat reserve for the panel is Councillor Julia McShane, so just to add that in there. And then I'll come to Sinead and then to Paul.
Thank you, Chair. The Conservative Group sub is Councillor Matt Furness.
Thank you very much. Paul.
Okay, I'll try and do this in a semi-structured way so I don't meander all over the place. But first of all, thank you very much to Sally and to Shella and to everybody who's worked on this. Obviously, these are things we need to get cracking on, and there's a lot of detail that has to be dealt with through this process. My understanding, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that Cumbria, for example, extended to deputies was because they could not fulfil the requirements for the applications. Now, not only are East and West Surrey individually much bigger and have more constituent authorities, I, at the moment, don't see it appropriate to go out to deputies when that was the fallback at Cumbria. It could, I think, be the fallback for us, but I don't think it should be the default. And the reason I would put that forward is severalfold. Firstly, deputies may not cover the entirety of a remit held by that director or that statutory officer. Two, they have not been through the same process as that director or statutory officer through the full council or otherwise through that process. And three, because deputies are hired to that position or appointed to that position at will by that statutory officer or director, somebody could be rendered eligible or ineligible by the actions of one of the existing directors, which I don't see as appropriate in this process. So I would propose to the committee that we keep the deputy option as a fallback if we don't have sufficient applications, but it should not be the default. I have a number of other points, but I'd like to start with that one.
Thank you, Paul. Mark.
Well, whilst accepting what Paul says, surely it is better, and we all sit around here as an inclusive bunch of people looking for the best possible option, is to have the best possible pool of people to pick from. There are a very small cohort of officers that are going to be in the situation, one, to apply for these roles, and two, who are qualified to actually carry those roles out. And I would imagine many or some will not want to apply for these roles. So we will need, and rather than wasting time, why don't we just open it up to the biggest cohort? This is not a lot of people in the first place. So I don't really see what the issue is there.
Thank you, Mark. Sean.
So on a theoretical basis, I agree with Mark, on a theoretical basis. However, listening to what Paul has said, he is right that the deputies have not gone through the same process as the lead officers. They haven't had the same member scrutiny panels in their selection. They are typically appointed by the head of paid service. So I don't feel comfortable extending it to the deputies until such time as the first pool have been reviewed for their interest in the roles. And Paul, just to re-emphasise, Paul is correct. There is twice as many people in our pool as was in Cumbria, more or less. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Do you want to hear from Sinead first, or do you want to speak? I'm just going to Terence and then you, Sinead.
Just for clarification, Karen and Nick can speak on behalf of their authorities. At the County Council, as I'm sure you're aware, Councillor Follows, not only is the head of paid service, but executive directors and directors are appointed by PPDC. So they are all subject to member appointment panels and the scrutiny that comes with that.
Sinead.
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Follows and myself actually sit on that committee at Surrey County, so you'll recognise that as fact. I just want to make a point that we've spoken about this unitary having very significant challenges ahead of us. And I think we need to take every opportunity to appoint the very best officers into these roles. Now, I have concerns about what Councillor Follows is suggesting, and one of the reasons I have concerns is we don't have a permanent chief executive here at Spelthorne. We're in the process of looking to recruit an interim chief exec, so that's one of the boroughs out. That's one potential candidate out of the equation. If you follow Councillor Follows' model, and then you start to get into really small and narrow numbers. If we weren't in the opportunity to appoint somebody, then we have to go back out through the process, and I think that's quite time-consuming. I should imagine that there are current chief executives who focus on that particular role who may have made a decision not to apply for this role for different reasons. So I think we're really narrowing opportunities that we have, and given the challenges ahead, we should open this up to deputy roles as well. I support that for those reasons.
Paul, and then Catherine.
Can I just come back to something the SRO said? I accept that those people go through the PPDC process, but not their deputies. I think you've highlighted the point that I was trying to make, which is the pool is sufficiently large without incorporating their deputies that have not been through that process. I think you've made the point for me.
Sorry, Chair, I jumped the gun there. Currently, we have Richard Wigley in the room, who's appointed by PPDC, who not only is not a member of the corporate leadership team, is tier down. Nicola also been appointed by PPDC. It's completely a matter for the joint committees who they decide to put in the pool. But I think for various reasons, you would not want to delay the opportunity to interview as many of the right people as possible. And the learning from Cumbria is that you want to get your interim appointed as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Terence. Catherine.
May I try a compromise? Since the name of the game is going to be compromise, I suspect. If a deputy has been appointed by a members' appointment panel, then I think they should be considered. If they have not been appointed by a members' appointment panel, then I don't think they should be eligible to apply. I think that's a compromise position that would widen the pool beyond current leaders in those roles, but wouldn't widen it so far that there has been no member input, and it addresses the concern that Paul was raising about deputies that have only been subject to appointment by the chief exec. I think it's a compromise, so I'd like to propose it.
Thank you, Karen. So we've got a proposal from Catherine and a second from Paul. Sorry, Mark, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, we're sitting around this table. I know we come from different political divides. We come from boroughs and districts. We come from councils. I do feel that there is a certain amount of obstruction at times going on here, and we are getting into the minute detail on some of this. Surely it's better to have a bigger pool of people to come from, whether they've gone through a PPDC or not. If they're deputies at a higher level and they are used to running this. No disrespect, or with the greatest respect to a lot of officers, stepping up into this role is going to be a huge task. So I am presuming, rightly or wrongly, and with the work streams that we've got in place, a lot of executive officers have got plenty to do at the moment. So, we do need to be a little bit more constructive, working together, maybe overlook some of the detail and look at the bigger picture.
Thank you, Mark. So I think we've had a useful proposal there from Catherine. Perhaps we don't narrow it to PPDC, which I don't actually know what it is, but people, places, development, I don't know what it is. Perhaps someone from county could clarify for me.
So if a member's appointment panel has appointed the person, then the deputy is eligible to stand. Apologies, PPDC is a Surrey phrase. My apologies. Must avoid using acronyms because they don't mean the same thing to everyone.
Yes, exactly. No, I gather that's what it was. So I think that amended proposal is fine. We've got a seconder, but I've got Karen who wishes to speak, so I'm just going to go to her. Thank you.
Absolutely, this is a member decision. I just wanted to point out that districts and boroughs, simply because of process, tend to have a different approach to appointing deputies, so they won't be appointed on the whole. There may be some exclusions, but by making that decision, you are automatically excluding most deputies from a borough or district.
Sean.
Yeah, I agree with the amended proposal. I accept Karen's feedback as well. Looking at from my perspective, which I think might be similar to the other districts and boroughs, that means the statutory officers are in the pool. Probably means their deputies aren't, but I'm okay with that.
Julia.
Thank you. I've listened to all the comments, and I'm just feeling that doesn't seem fair on the other deputies. And I think I don't see any issue with going through the process the correct way in doing the first pool of people. And if we can't recruit from that, then we go to the next level. And I get that people are trying to offer compromises, but I'm just not feeling that that's the right thing to do. I'm sorry to disagree with others on the committee.
Okay, well, we have the proposal on the table before us, which is that the initial tranche certainly would be open to the lead person, the post holder, and the deputy if selected by member selection. I think we've still got then the option to go out to a wider pool, including those that you mentioned, Julia, if necessary, and that could be done at the earliest possible stage. So I'm going to put the proposal made by Catherine and seconded by Paul. Was it Paul or Sean? Sorry, it was Paul. Sorry, seconded by Paul to the committee. We'll take a vote on that. So those in favour of Catherine's proposal. Thank you. And anyone against that? Okay, thank you very much. So we will go ahead on that basis. Do I have any further speakers on this, Sean?
Thank you. I am conscious of Mark's feedback on getting into the weeds and Sinead's comments on timekeeping last time, so I'll try and be swift. I think members would recognise that last time I tried to emphasise the need for this process to be seen to be fair and clearly demonstrate that it's fair. And therefore, I would like to suggest a couple of amendments in the role of the independent oversight. Specifically under the guiding principles, the last bullet relates to the independent oversight. It says where appropriate. I think just making the link back to the members' preeminence here, that all requested by the working group chair could be a sensible amendment. So that's in the guiding principles. If we moved on further down, it talks about the independent advisor who's not an officer of any Surrey council. I would like to suggest that we add, nor has had any prior private or public dealings with the candidate pool, because Surrey is quite an incestuous place, I have found, when it comes to these kind of relationships. And also in that same paragraph that the working group chair will approve the appointment of the independent person, obviously working very closely with the relevant officers. If in the same vein under 3.5, that the independent person to be present for key elements of this activity and follow-up, which I think is the detailed selection process. And just a point for clarification, I apologise to Sally for not getting all these kind of questions to her first, is could we just confirm that everything apart from the interviews will be virtual, because time is a bit precious and we're spending a lot of time in what are moderately dry meetings, as I think we would all agree. And I think that's it, if the members could consider those small enhancements in terms of the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Mark?
Couple of points with respect to what Sean has said there. As with councillors, I'm guessing that officers know a lot of officers around the country. You meet in various conferences, your work streams, etc. So we are, again, making life potentially quite difficult to find an independent person to come because they're bound to know somebody within the pool, especially if officers have been around for some time. As we all know, councillors from across the country, I'm sure officers know many officers around the country. So that could, again, make life slightly tricky. I have an issue with virtual meetings in this respect. This is an important role, and I do think, as is with our PPDC, our interview panel at Surrey County Council always meets in person, so that we can see that person face to face, get a feel for them, get a feel for how they're going to actually be able to communicate to staff, and you can't do that virtually. It does not come across in the same way. So I would actually potentially vie towards having a more, certainly for the final interviews, maybe for the selection process, but when it comes down to the crunch, I think you've definitely got to meet them in person.
I believe that's what was being recommended. It was just about getting the panel together and preparing, but the actual interview be in person. So thank you, Mark. I've got Sinead, then Sean, then Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sean and Mark have covered what I was going to ask. I think I just wanted to touch on inclusive process, 3.2 of this paper. Just looking around at the members of the Joint Committee, we're inclusive in some elements, but not all. So I think that the membership of the working group is probably as inclusive as it can be. I don't know if officers have a particular view on that, because I'm looking at the unfair disadvantage towards candidates and potential outcomes under the Equality Act. The other point I wanted to make was there's 4 members of this group. I believe in the East Unitary there's 5. If there's a draw, who makes the decision?
Thank you for that. We'll go to the other speakers and then get some clarity on that. So Sean, then Paul.
I was going to come back on the previous point, but I agree with Sinead in terms of the diversity, inclusivity, and making sure we're being equitable in how we approach this. I think the paper says that the chair would have the casting vote, but equally I think that we need to get to a stage where we don't need to have a casting vote. We need to have consensus, we need to have scoring matrices, we need to make this as fact-based as possible, which I'm sure is what the officers will drive us towards. And to be honest, independent of time, Sinead, I think we stay in that room until we get consensus. Thank you.
Please do, Sinead, thank you.
Who is the chair of the working group then?
Working group will elect its chair.
At the first meeting?
Yes. Mark, is this on the same point?
A similar point around conflicts. It's just suddenly crossed my mind, and I know this is probably going to be impossible to do, but you've got an interview panel of 4 members here who potentially will be interviewing their leader, let's say, for example, who they have a close relationship with. Does that come across as a conflict? And in that instance, should that person be removed from that vote and the deputy come in play?
Yes, that probably is the best approach if a deputy is required in that sense. Yeah, members will need to decide whether they've got that conflict, won't they? Exactly. Sean, and then I have got Paul afterwards.
I kind of agree with Mark, but we're now adding a layer of complexity that's going to be very difficult to cope with, because as you may appreciate, you know, you've got 3 here, but how is that going to work practically? I think the other thing that we probably just omitted in our discussion is that the independent person would be in the room as well as part of the process, and I certainly would be wanting to lean on them quite heavily in terms of their expertise and what they're seeing in this process as well. But I accept Mark's point is a risk.
Paul.
I also accept Mark's point. I think we're in the same position where even if it's not your direct chief executive or monitoring officer or whatever, you quite likely met or interacted with these people in the process of doing the job that we all do. So we're going to have to manage that. I completely understand. Just a couple of small points, well, one small point and one bigger one. The first one, if I can just ask this one quickly, in terms of, are you foreseeing any recruitment agency or outside body involvement in this process?
Thank you, Karen.
No. So we are talking about the independent chief exec, who we have mentioned, and also in the room will be a senior HR officer, maybe two. You'll certainly have Shella and or Sally or both.
I'd certainly be very happy to have both in the room personally, I have to say. Just in terms of if there was a point where a recruitment agency or others from outside were being brought in or instructed, I would certainly be asking that it be subject to the approval of the working group. As that's not the case, that's absolutely fine. And just one other thing that I probably will need an HR person just to advise on. In terms of equity of access to positions or the theoretical positions, I think you're in a position where a county employee could apply for the equivalent job in East and West, whereas a borough employee would only be able to be eligible within their jurisdiction. Can I just ask possibly a really unfair question? Do you believe that that is fair, and do you advise that the committee remediate that in some way if you do believe it's unfair?
Karen or Sally? Yeah, Sally. Thank you, Sally.
So the reason for that, I believe, is due to the wording in the structural changes order. So it's something that we're legally required to do. The structural changes order says that in the East, the interim officer can be appointed from the one of the councils in the East or the county, and the same wording applies in the West, one of the officers in the West or an officer from the county. So we absolutely have to revert to the wording of the structural changes order for that. So it's not really a question of whether it's fair or not, it's a question of what the structural changes order says, I think.
Thank you then, Paul and Liz.
Very, very short one. Does the structural change order override existing HR legislation that exists then? Because surely there is not the same equality of access to the roles for borough versus county officers. And I know the order says that, but then I would be pretty sure there's other legislation that would go against that position.
I think Karen was looking to answer that. Is that okay, Sally?
Not wishing to get into the legalities of it, because I haven't taken a legal view because I didn't know this question was coming up. But the structural order, I have the wording of the structural changes order in front of me. It simply says that the shadow authority at its first meeting must designate an officer from the county or an officer from the West as described by Sally. It doesn't say X officer can only apply or whatever. It simply says you have to designate. I suspect there may be an issue of equity if you can say to, if you say to an officer of the county council who in the structural changes order could be appointed in either, but you can only apply for one. I was also thinking about it because it was muttered to me before the meeting about this might come up. So I was thinking about it from a practical point of view, because unless the East is equally minded to go the same way as you are and say that a county officer can only apply in one way, then it would be very messy, because the East would be saying we welcome all applications, and the West would be saying, oh, but if you've already applied to the East, then we're not allowing you to apply to us. You know, fundamentally, this remains a member decision. Whoever comes in front of you in the day, you can choose to appoint them, you can choose not to appoint them and recommend. Well, you're not even appointing, you're recommending to the shadow authority. If you want to go with this, if you do want to pursue this, I would ask for an opportunity to take some probably specialist legal advice. Okay. Because I was going to suggest we bring it back to the committee, otherwise.
Okay, so I think we've covered that one. So I had Liz and then Catherine.
My point's been covered now. Thank you, Chair.
Catherine.
I think that my question comes from what's just been discussed. If the two appointment panels sit and they decide that the best candidate is the same person, what happens then? Because there is the reality of that could happen, right? And presumably they can't do 3 jobs. I mean, it's bad enough as Terence and Nicola know, and all of you know, that doing 2 is bad enough. But I do think that we do need to get some guidance on some of these more nuanced things that, whilst they may well not happen because the interview panel is different, it's not beyond the realms of possibility.
Thanks, Catherine. Terence wanted to speak on this.
I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I perhaps wouldn't have taken the Surrey Chief Executive job if I knew this was coming along. I would think that it is highly unlikely that you're going to get someone from the county applying for both of the posts. So, yeah. Well, I don't have fingers crossed because you don't want them to, or you do want them to, Councillor Powell.
Time will tell, Terence.
There's a risk that we need to be aware of. Okay, so I'm going to bring this item to a close now if we are all done. Does anyone have any further contributions to make on this? Sean?
Could I just check that my proposed amendments are broadly accepted by members in terms of increasing the independent oversight and involvement in the process?
Are we agreed with that? Thank you. Okay, so we then just need to note the recommendations before us. So we've confirmed the members and the substitutes from all the groups. The member working group will present to the final meeting of the Joint Committee in May. Note the proposed timeline that we have. We've just discussed the eligibility as to who can stand and delegating authority to the people workstream lead and in consultation with the member working group. Is that all agreed? Thank you very much. We'll move on to our final agenda item then, which is the setting of member allowances. This is on pages 47 to 53 in the pack. And I'll look to who's going to introduce this one. Is that going to be yourself, Karen, or Susan? Right, welcome. I'm going to welcome Susan Sale then. And Susan is the Constitutional and Shadow Authority Co-Work Stream Lead. That's a mouthful of a title, isn't it? She's also Strategic Director for Democracy, Law and People and Monitoring Officer at Guildford and Waverley Borough Councils. Wow, that's a lot, isn't it? When you're ready, Susan, perhaps you could introduce this for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. So the Joint Committee will be aware that we're expecting the structural change order that comes into force in March to require each of the shadow councils to adopt a members' allowance scheme for the shadow period up to vesting day, so that the shadow council is able to pay their members for their service. In adopting such a scheme, it's a statutory requirement that the shadow councils need to take account of the recommendations of an independent remuneration panel established for that purpose. And what we are proposing in the report before you today is that the Joint Committee authorises the preparation of an independent remuneration panel report to come back to this committee in due course. Members are being asked to approve the creation of a joint panel of 5 members from within the existing Surrey Council's independent remuneration panel members, and to delegate the appointment to the theme sponsor for People and Governance Workstream. It's anticipated that the panel members will require a refresher training session and then potentially 2 to 3 half-day sessions to be able to complete their workstream. And the proposal is that a payment would be made to them from the LGR fund of £60 per day plus expenses for the work that they do, and there would also be a small cost in terms of training provision. The IRP will be commissioned to prepare a members' allowance scheme to come back to this committee, hopefully by April, but if not, definitely by May, and then this committee will be asked to recommend that to the inaugural meeting of the Shadow Council. It's likely that the panel will consider basic allowances and also special responsibility allowances for known roles that we are aware of at that time. But just to be clear, their work may need to flex during the shadow period, depending on what roles and what governance structures and what committees are established by the Shadow Council. So we're likely to need further input from them during that shadow period. And just to flag as well that there will need to be a separate members allowance scheme ready for vesting day, which will take effect after vesting day for all councillors. That may include the same independent remuneration panel members. It may be the same scheme, but that will be a decision for later by the shadow councils. So all we're proposing at the moment is authorisation for the preparatory work for the initial members allowance scheme for the shadow council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Susan, Paul, and then Joe.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Susan, for all the work that you and your colleagues have put in on this. I was originally going to be coming here and suggesting that we should have separate ones for East and West, but I think realistically there's no need at this point, because at the point of incorporation they will be the same. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure they will diverge in structure very swiftly, considering the potential nature of both councils, and so I completely support the recommendation as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark. Oh, sorry, I had Joe and then Mark, sorry.
Thank you. If I may, Susan, I just want to have clarification, please, on page 47. Recommendation 3, you said £60 per day. I just want to check. It was £60 per half day. I just wanted to make sure whether the papers were correct. That was all.
Apologies, Chair, that was my error. It's £60 per half-day session that we are proposing.
Thank you, and thank you very much indeed for your report. Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with the recommendation. But what I did want to highlight, though, and it's something that hasn't been discussed, is around whether it's this committee or whether it's a work stream that needs to go out there, is about advertising the role of councillor. We have got a whole new cohort of people potentially standing for election, borough councillors, some existing county councillors, and obviously new councillors. Now, normally we would run programmes running up to election on explaining exactly what was involved. Now, I know we don't know what the Shadow Council will actually do. We've got some idea. But do you or this committee think it's a good idea in some shape or form to advertise the role as a councillor so people have some awareness of what they are actually standing for election for?
It's quite a challenge, isn't it? Liz.
I think that, to be fair, that comes out of the, it's beyond the remit of this, which is a recommendation of a members' allowance scheme. I think, that advertising it, I think it will be up to, you as a political party and your political parties to advertise for candidates and get candidates.
So, I wasn't suggesting amending this motion. It pointed me to suggest that we ought to look at that. That was all. Otherwise, as has happened across the country, we've had mass resignations in certain councils because they didn't understand what they were actually going to go into.
Well, no comment on that one, but yeah, no, it's a good point. It is a good point to be thinking about going forward. I think we need to be cognizant of it, don't we? Paul.
So, I mean, I think a few of us here over the other side, the LGA obviously do some of these things as well. I think most of our sovereign authorities still do the sort of be a councillor kind of sessions as well that are quite generic. I do reflect on the fact that if somebody had told me all the things that it would involve being a councillor, I would have run an absolute mile. There's only so far I think it would be wise for us to go if we want anybody to stand in this election at all. So, but I understand where you're coming from, Mark.
I've got Karen and then Sean. I'll come to you.
I can't offer any information about in advance of the elections, but just to reassure members that the Shadow Authority work stream, which is being led by Mary Roberts-Woods from Reigate and Banstead, one of their key priorities is looking very much at induction, including that very vital period between the day of the election and the AGM. So there are plans for a lot of meetings, a lot of training over the vesting period.
Thanks for that, Karen. Sean?
Yeah, thank you. I think Karen's made the point, one of the points I was going to make, so thank you. I don't have a problem per se with the proposal, but I just want to revisit my point around Surrey actually being quite a small place, even with 1.2 million people. And that in the appointment of the panel, due consideration is given that they don't have any conflict of interest with an existing council, because I know from my own experience, and I won't name it, that our panel, there are then subsequently connections. So I think we need to be mindful of that. And then I think the second thing is, because we are looking at panel for the whole of Surrey, it would be interesting, taking on board Mark's point and others about making sure we have the very best people and a diverse population as well, that we've considered a geographic spread as well, so that we are representative of the whole area. So yeah, no major problems, but if we could just consider that. And I don't know whether maybe one of the panels should be considered from outside the area, just to bring in different and new ideas, but I'll leave that to the officers to consider. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. I believe often that the people do come from other areas, but I think Susan's going to give us some clarity anyway. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think several of the existing IRP members are from outside of the Surrey geographical area in any event. But thank you for the feedback, Councillor MacDonald. We will certainly ensure that the point about conflicts is addressed in the selection process. And we are very keen to ensure that we select a panel who have include both county and district and borough experience, and also that they are geographically spread. So we will certainly take that comment on board. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just come back to you, Sean, and then Joe.
Yeah, thanks ever so much for that feedback. I realised I missed one thing, sorry, and I think it might link to what Paul said. The list of potential SRAs is very long, especially for a body that will want to set its own direction and its own ways of working. So my humble suggestion is that list is looked at in terms of the bare legal minimum that is required, and the initial group focuses on that. And then any subsequent work, I think, can be a tweak on that, because as councils evolve over time, typically it goes back to the panel for a refresh for those additional roles, uses the same model and just changes the percentage of the whatever the highest allowance is. So I don't think it's a major thing to do, but I think it would send the right message that we're not, as Terence has reminded us, we're not dictating to the shadow authority how they should be organised. That's very much for them to decide.
Thanks, Sean. Joe.
Chair, it's not on this point, but I'm mindful there is AOB and I didn't want you to close. I have a point that I'd like to make, but it's not on this point.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I must admit I was keen to make that point about that long list of the roles, and would agree with Sean that yeah, just the core really seems necessary. And we've got things there like chair of neighbourhood area committees, which we haven't even decided as a council it would have neighbourhood area committees. So it seems a little presumptuous to put those sorts of things in there. I think just keeping to the basics would be clear. I did have one question actually for Susan or for Karen. Usually when we have a panel looking at independently remuneration, they will do a survey of councillors and find out what work they're doing at the moment, what the level of work is, what their input is, and then they'll base their recommendations partly on that. How will information be gathered by this independent panel in this situation?
Thank you for the question, Chair. I think ultimately that will be a decision for the panel themselves as to how they want to gather their information. But you're right that normally they do interview members. They may want to interview some of the Joint Committee, for example, but I think primarily they'll be taking their information from other authorities that have gone through this experience previously, such as Cumbria, North Yorkshire, etc., where they will be able to glean some information as to the reality of the workload of a shadow council member as opposed to post-vesting day member.
Thank you very much for that clarity. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of that discussion then. So we're recommending that we approve the creation of a single independent remuneration panel along with the East. We're delegating that to the People and Governance theme sponsor, that's Karen, in consultation with the chairs of the joint committees. We're approving the payment per half day of £60 plus reasonable expenses, and we are delegating then to the Constitutional and Shadow Authority workstream leads the authority to commission the panel and produce a report to the committee. Is that agreed? Yes. Thank you. We don't actually have any other business on the agenda, but we do have a whole 5 minutes left, so I'm sure we can't make any actual formal decisions or anything, but as Jo has an AOB, I'll let her raise that whilst the committee is here, or anybody else who has an AOB, so I'll hand over to Jo.
I'm very grateful. Thank you, Chair. I just want to bring to members that West Surrey and South and Middlesex Council, as a new name change, that we have spoken about this previously, but not in the public domain, is gathering momentum, specifically with Russell Grant. I think it's really important that we are very clear in terms of the name change, where we are at this moment in terms of the structural change order, because obviously the name is included in that, whether or not this committee will consider what is gathering momentum, and indeed whether or not it will look at this at a later stage. And I just wanted to get some clarity, because I think we need to be very fair to those residents, and obviously this Facebook page that seems to be gathering momentum.
Thank you for that, Jo. So as I understand it, the name is actually set down in the structural change order, so we have no power to change that. It would need to be a decision of the shadow authority. So that's why. Does anyone else have any other business at all before I close? No, he's just moving around slightly. Okay, great. Well, that brings us to the end of the meeting. I would like to thank all of the officers for their contributions today, particularly, obviously, Terence for his huge role, and Nicola for all the huge work she does to pull all of this together, but all of the officers leading and working on the work streams. Really appreciate all of your help, and Nick as our deputy here, and then for all the councillors and your contributions today. Our next meeting will be on the Friday the 13th of March, and we have be held in Elmbridge. Look forward to seeing you all again then, and you've got 4 minutes of your lives